Great. Welcome to class 6, part 2 of painting the illuminated landscape or luminous landscape. And I'm going to just play for a little bit. This is an exercise I love doing. I just love playing. And again, I just urge you guys to pick 1, 2, 3 different motifs that you get comfortable with, where you just don't have to overthink it too much, where you can just play and you can experiment with the other elements, be it color, be it brushwork, be it whatever it is. And you can just lean into that side of things. I'm not leaning into any side of anything besides, I guess, just showing you guys what I do. And there are times like today where if it wasn't for class, today would not be a painting day. I'm tired, I'm beat up, emotionally, physically, whatever it is. But, the show must go on. Let's keep going. And so I'm going to use this as an excuse to play. And that makes me excited. So now I'm excited to be painting because I've just given myself that step back and just said, you know what, Michael, as he talks to himself in the third person, you do not have to create a masterpiece. You just get to play with paint and color and hang out with your good friends and have a good time. So let's get rolling. I am going to be stepping away from the microphone. I'll talk a little louder, but hopefully it's working properly. What's happening is my computer's a little bit on the older side, and the where the USB lines up with the cords is not as strong, so I need to replace my USB ports, which is a little above my sophistication and pay grade. So I'm gonna just do this in the way I'm the most comfortable with. I'm just gonna take some Indian yellow. I'm gonna scrub that on, and I'm just gonna build up a couple quick layers of paint.
Could you tell us what colors you have up there, please?
I can do my best. So what I have up here is, I believe, a titanium white. It's not in English. It's in French and in Chinese.
That's
Well, it's white anyway.
But it's a white, yeah.
That means you have to paint with an accent too.
Hansa yellow light. I almost didn't put this color there, and I might not use it on this painting. I pulled it out for the painting of Gail's reference, Indian yellow. And that with the Indian yellow, I can actually make something fairly similar to that Hansa yellow or anything. It'll be a little warmer, but the more white I add to it, the yellower it gets. And I just don't know if I need a bright yellow.
That's close.
Right. It's just going to be a little warmer. So if I need a cool yellow, I'll dip into that. But it is a semi-transparent. So I imagine that this is the first time I've ever used this tube of white paint. It was just one I bought online. So I don't know its opacity. And unfortunately, I don't speak French or Chinese. And it actually doesn't have any information on the back. So it's a cheap tube of white paint. This Hansa yellow light is a semi-transparent. My Indian yellow is a fully transparent. And then I went ahead and added a cadmium red light, which is a very opaque color. This color will have a lot of coverage. Again, when I was looking at the reference that Gail is letting us use, the greens are actually very red and very brown in the trees. And so I thought having a bit of coverage, opacity may be useful. Otherwise, I probably could have gotten away with just a quinacridone red, which is a transparent red. And I can actually make this, even though it leans towards purple more than this other, I can actually make it quite warm by just using the Indian yellow with it. And then I have ultramarine blue, which is probably the most common blue I use. It does lean towards purple. It has a little bit of red in it, and it's quite a bit darker. So I almost didn't squeeze out manganese blue, but you know, manganese blue does make more beautiful greens, a little more pure. It's also a semi-transparent. So then I squeezed out I was thinking that a yellow ochre might be really useful today, just because the reddish greens that are in the trees, again, I'm thinking not for this painting, I'm thinking for the next painting, the reference that Gail provided. But most yellow ochres are considered very opaque or semi-opaque. But I actually squeezed out a tube of one of my favorite guest colors, which is called gold ochre. It's not always the easiest color to find, but the interesting thing about gold ochre is that it's actually a transparent color. So, you know, if that's something that's interesting, kind of a dirty, warm yellow, and it just plays really wonderfully with like Payne's gray. There's times when I lay out a palette where my blue is actually Payne's gray, my red is a transparent earth red, and my yellow is a gold ochre. And I make these really, in my opinion, just wonderful tonalist paintings, because I can't get pure color. Everything's going to be muted and neutral. So I really like gold ochre, but I don't use it very often. So that's those colors coming down here. We've got some burnt umber. Again, this is going to be an opaque color. So that's going to help me when I need to build up density in the shadows and different things. I can simply mix my burnt umber with my ultramarine, and I'll make these really wonderful darks. I can lean them a little warmer. I can lean them a little cooler, a little more towards the blue. So yeah, these two colors make great darks. And then beneath that, I actually have, and I rarely have burnt umber and transparent earth red together on the palette. Transparent earth red, just like the title says, just like the name says, is much more transparent. And you're gonna see what's gonna happen, I hope, here in just a minute. I'm gonna actually mix burnt umber and transparent earth red and ultramarine to create my darks that I'm gonna lay over this Indian yellow. And what's gonna happen, I hope, when I wipe away is that the burnt umber, because it's a transparent color, is going to stain the surface a little bit more. So you're going to get this kind of interesting glowiness from that. But then the burnt umber is going to give me the density in the darks. Go ahead and ask questions right now, because I know I did not explain that very well.
Michael, I have a question.
Yeah.
Did you mix white in the with the Indian yellow?
I do not. No, I generally do not mix any white when I'm planning to do a wipe away, unless I want to have, you know, no darks.
Oh, okay.
So when I do a wipe away, it's almost always just kind of pure colors. So right now I'm putting that Indian yellow down. There's no white in it, but why it looks lighter is because, you know, the light's going through this transparent paint, hitting that canvas, which, you know, we can see when I simply wipe away a little bit, how much lighter it gets. So I'm just letting this first layer stain for a minute or two, and I'm going to do different. Normally I would kind of wipe this back, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep layering paints really quickly. I should probably kind of think of a bit of a design or something as I'm doing this, but I'm going to go ahead and grab my transparent earth red.
And Mike,
I don't have burnt umber, but I have raw umber or dark sienna. Would either of those work?
Yes, both of those would work.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, I haven't used either of those. I have tubes of them, but I haven't used them much. So I'm not going to be a huge amount of help. I do know that the burnt sienna goes a touch more on the green side than the reddish brown side. I do know a lot of artists that I really like that will use burnt sienna more than burnt umber. But I like my paintings a lot of times to kind of go towards the warms. So I just think of the reds and golds and colors like that. So I'm just gonna, I just took my other transparent color, my transparent earth red, and I'm just gonna scrub some of that on there now too. I'm just kind of messing this surface up. Already you can tell that I'm just hopefully having fun. I'm not overly, this cheap brush is throwing hairs all over the place. I'm just scrubbing in some stuff.
Michael, does your transparent earth red, is that close to a, is that close in color to a burnt sienna? I've got a transparent red oxide.
That's what I have.
That's the same, yeah. So
Okay, that's what I want.
the transparent earth red is an oxide red, an oxide
Mm.
brown. Any of those oxide colors are pretty similar. It's just Gamblin paint that I'm using today. Their brand, the name for that color for them is.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so you can see two transparent colors on top of each other. Let's go ahead and mix a batch of burnt umber. I'm just going to go ahead and put it right into there. I'm going to put some ultramarine blue to kind of darken that. You'll see that as soon as I start mixing, it gets a little cooler, a little kind of more black-ish. I'm going to go ahead and mix some Indian yellow into it. I can mix a bit of quinacridone red. I can get crazy with this stage. And I'm just making a dark color. Again, sometimes I'll kind of wipe it down in between stages here. And another thing that I like to keep in mind for those of you who are writing down notes is that sometimes it's fun to think about oil painting as carving or as sculpting. So that's what I'm going to do a little bit here. I'm going to be, imagine that I had a big lump of clay and I wanted to make my sculpture by removing the clay. In the beginning stage of this painting, that's literally how I'm thinking about it. I'm just putting clay onto this surface and then I'm going to remove some of it. Does that make sense? Kind of sculpting versus building up. Now I got to think of my design a little bit here. Let's just kind of give ourselves kind of a bank here. Let's give ourselves some shapes. I want to create some movement, some flow. I've also
Excuse me, Michael, are these colors straight from the tube or did you add just a tiny bit of Gamsol to them?
I have not added any Gamsol because it'll make it really slick. I actually want a little bit of that stickiness that's kind of in there.
I've got another question for you too, Michael. Would the transparent oxide yellow be similar to the yellow ochre?
Yes, also very transparent. That's a wonderful color. If
Okay.
you mix it with like transparent red, you get these interesting transparent dirty oranges that I used to use a lot in my paintings. Yeah, great for you for being a tonalist painter, kind of. I'm just kind of thinking like, okay, this tree's taller, this tree's smaller, maybe it goes down this direction, just like Michelle was saying. Maybe I want a little bit of movement. Maybe my bank is a little bit this way. Also got to think of the reflections. And you can see I'm just playing. I'm just,
Just what's the matter?
you're like, playing isn't messy, but when I play, it's messy. I'll clean my studio later. I'll clean my brushes later. Sometimes I'm just
Damage.
I'm just putting on big shapes, big forms. I might even throw some darks up here in the sky. Kind of like, okay, that'll force me to bring my lights a little differently. Man, oh man, what a mess, right? Let's even make it worse.
What kind of
Is it-
surface is your board? Is it a really smooth surface or is it texture?
Yes, this is much more smooth than I normally do because it's a gessoed panel. And I did not add my own gesso on top because I normally add that cheap, a layer or two of at least some cheap gesso that's a little more absorbent. So this, I bet you I can wipe way back compared to, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab a big brush, which I don't have in here. They must all be dirty. And I'm just gonna kind of smooth that out. So I just literally just went into my thing there. This is quite literally a huge house brush. I'm just gonna, and don't worry, I'll bring it back down because you can see the glare. Isn't that interesting how the glare when I do horizontal brush strokes versus vertical?
Mhm.
Whew.
Look at the difference.
Now I just need to pick out a couple hairs that are on there. A couple like 20. That might be the last time I use that brush that I was just scribbling on there because I like it as they get older and make interesting marks. But eventually it's just so much work just pulling out all the hairs as they really start to fall out. So now what I can do is, I mean, I'm just gonna let that sit for a second, but can you guys already see the beginning of a painting?
Yes,
Yeah.
Beginning of a structure? And a lot of times I kind of just respond. You know what I mean? I'm just having fun. I'm just putting on some paint. This is also really fun at the end of your day when you're painting. It's just to go, you know what? I've got these interesting colors. I've got some leftover paint, not enough to, maybe put away or put in the freezer or save or whatever else. I wish this brush was softer. I'm definitely leaving some very strong bristles. This is a very cheap, probably the cheapest house painting brush you can get. It's getting worse. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'm just gonna grab a really soft brush. I'm just gonna brush that out just a touch. Otherwise, I just have these big streaks because I've got a lot of paint on there, you guys. I put what, 2 different coats of transparent paint, put a big glob of dark paints on there. So there's a lot of paint on there. I've really, again, going back to the analogy of sculpting, put a lot of clay on this surface already.
I was wondering, we talked about saving paint and I suggested those little 1-ounce containers. If you flatten that and the paint you put in there and then you just put a dab of the medium on top of it, wouldn't that keep it wet? Or would it?
The medium is a dryer.
No, so that would make it dry more.
You would want to put oil. A drop or 2 of whatever the oil is that's in those paints.
Like linseed oil,
Exactly.
okay?
Well, how would you do that then?
You would want to push it down in the bottom or as far as you can, flatten it out, I think, as much as you could, and then just put a little bit on top of it. And if you've got too much, you could always pour it off.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I just use a dropper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, these kind of droppers right here. Just a couple of drops will do you. Again, all you have to do is get oxygen off those paints. All right, let's just go ahead and go for it. I'm just going to grab some paper towels and I'm just kind of trying to visualize kind of what's the top of these trees look like? What could make that a little bit interesting? Probably having a steady line going down from highest to lowest isn't that interesting. So maybe I'll bring this grouping down a little bit. And then maybe it carves in here, maybe it goes up a little bit. Maybe this is our tallest tree. And maybe we got one little guy hanging out over here, kind of a thing. Take a second, I can kind of look at it, decide if that's interesting. So again, sculpting, I just grabbed a big handful of clay, pulled it off, and I'm just kind of looking at the movement within the piece. I can say, you know what? I don't like the fact that they're all rounded. Let's break that up a little bit. I could also do that in a little while, but I'm just kind of thinking, forget I have to come for the monitor, I have to come down with it. I'll keep using this soft brush just so you guys can actually see it. All right, let's look underneath the trees now. Sometimes I will kind of preserve the trunks, as it were, by like just kind of going up beside them and making them as, you know, thick or thin. So you can kind of see, like I've hinted at a couple trunks there. But I've also found that it's pretty easy just to, you know, take a little bit of paint from what I have or from over here, and then just to come back in and draw that trunk. So I don't try to protect the trunks as much as I used to. What I'm going to be doing is looking at the tops. So generally where they come down is also going to be kind of where they go up the furthest, if that makes sense. Meaning that there's not really a tree there. Michelle really affected me by asking about movement in it. So I'm going to see if I can do something a little different than having just straight lines across just all horizontals. And I can always change it. That's the great thing, is I can take away, I can add paint back.
And if you like the horizontal, you can leave it that way, right?
I used to like the horizontal until you said that.
Well, I was hoping you'd say, yeah, just horizontals are great.
Oh, okay, yeah. Wear striped shirts.
Our cowboy shirts.
No, you know me. I do like to have some movement and stuff. So, and you know, I don't want to just keep doing exactly the same thing as I've done all these years. So, you know, how can I kind of change it up? Maybe a little bit of an angle there. Maybe I can, you know, do the inverse here. So, you know, I'm still thinking design. It's not as much. This painting isn't so much about design, and it's also not about mimicking. Look at that. There's some trees. And yeah, so it's just, again, having fun, experimenting, trying different things, but within a semi comfortable space.
Horizontals tend to be very calming as well, so that may be why it's a stress relief.
Yeah, you're right.
Agree. Yeah, that's a good observation, because if you're attracted to a horizontal painting at some points in times. There may be other times when you're attracted to something more energetic, and
Mhm.
maybe that's a good reflection on where you're at in your life.
Mhm. And where you're at when you're doing your painting too.
Right.
If you're playing to relax, that may be why you keep doing horizontals.
Yeah, yeah, good point. And right now I need to not fall asleep. So add some angles. Angles
That's
are the
really-
most energetic. The horizontals are considered like strength. You know, getting some, so you can see how much this solid upright that I left there, how much stronger that looks at than the implied ones. And it just, again, it just kind of the idea of strength and just defying gravity, just being able to stand up to gravity.
That strength also leads your eye to that area.
Yep.
You're looking for direction.
Definitely. I just have so much fun because it's amazing to me. Let me go ahead and just take my soft brush and just brush that down so you don't have all the reflections in there. But I'm always amazed that within minutes how something that never existed before on, you know, on a tired artist's body, tired brain, still kind of begins to reveal itself. Isn't that interesting? I mean,
You can
that's
stop
already
now.
almost a something.
You can stop now.
There you go. What's this? I gotta do something with that.
That's a little cat.
You've done another landscape abstract or abstract land.
Exactly, the illuminated tones kind of a thing.
Exactly.
Really pretty already.
It's beautiful.
So now I've got areas of little paint, areas of dense paint, areas of in-between paint. And I can literally, now it's like I'm taking that clay and I'm using it to move it around a little bit that's on there, right? I can know that my brush is picking up some more paint. So I know that the more I keep touching, the less clean I'm making it, but I can actually use that to like, oh, I want some softer transition up here. So I can use some of that paint that's on there. Where do we want our light in this? Do we want it like in kind of a generic nice spot? Do we want it overhead? Do we want it behind a tree?
Right where you have that big spot on the right hand side, like
Your thumbprint.
yeah, right down, right down, down, right there,
Yeah, right there.
right there.
All right, look at you
Seems
guys.
like it chose that spot.
Yeah.
Did, yeah. So there we go. Let's. Now I've got to decide, do I want a bunch of trunks or do I want just a few? Do I want thinner trunks, thicker trunks? You know, I'm kind of feeling the thinner trunks. Maybe we can have a couple areas where the trees are a little different. Like this guy could be a little more interesting, have a little bit of a curve, some motion, a little bit of danciness to him. These guys maybe over here, a little more sapling-like, but what if we gave them a little bit of an angle? Right? Just a bunch of upright trees, trunks, probably gonna be boring, and then it would be horizontals and verticals, right? So let's hint at just a little bit of movement in there. Who here cannot wait for class to be over, so I'll shut up? I mean, so you can start painting.
No,
Michael, you're tired. You should go, you should make this class short.
Oh, yeah, well, that never happens, so we'll see.
I love this. It's very helpful for me.
this is beautiful.
All right, and then I'm just gonna reverse that, and in the reflections, I can make it as tight of a reflection, or I could, make it like there's a little bit of wind and my reflections aren't quite perfect. I just kind of want to get those, mimicking lights and darks kind of in there.
Tell me about the wind again.
The wind would move the water and make the reflection a little more like this.
Right. Okay, I see.
So if I try to do a perfect replication of the reflections, but I'm off, I can just, oh, sorry, it's a windy day.
I thought you had done something previously that led to the wind effect.
8 beans. Sorry.
That's all right.
Um, it's just usually the reflections are just an inverse of what's above. So I just kind of, and I'm still just using my big fat fingers here, just kind of carving out my big shapes, kind of making my plan, but I can definitely get in here with Q-tips, or I could just let it dry and then come back with opaque paint and alter this, as tight or as rendery as I want to make it. I can decide that.
Mouse. Mouse.
So, it can be big and loose. There's times where I leave it looking like just big popsicles, other times where I get in there and I just start getting so fascinated and interested in what's the branch structure here at the, as it feeds into the leaves up above, and are there, and again, I just want to make sure that I'm not replicating any distances. I've got various forms, various movements, angles. Again, I think about dance and movement, and that's just something I learned again looking at some of my favorite painters from history. Arthur Matthews, I just always felt like his trees were so dancey. They just felt they had a humanistic quality to them, but a beauty, and I liked how they just seemed to live within nature and dance with the wind and all of that. So that's something I try to remember when I'm trying to not let my shapes be too redundant. Just think of them as dancers, kind of like, what's the movement, But again, they're all dancing slightly to their own rhythm, because otherwise I'd have them all curving the same way. You could have synchronized dancers if you wanted, but I personally would probably find that a little less interesting, both to paint and to look at. But so I want to look at these big undulating shapes and see if I can't get some of that, because right now all my lights and darks are kind of a line across where these are not. So I'm just going to look and say, okay, yeah, these go a little higher. So now they go a little lower. These go a little higher. Now they go a little lower. See how that mimics the above again? Just going to go ahead and take my soft brush again and brush it out just so I can see again these reflections on there, the glare. It's a little odd. Just a real soft brush. I'm just barely kind of skimming it across. Just creating a little bit of movement in those reflections, hopefully. Let's see. Michelle is living rent-free in my head right now, so let's try and figure out a little bit of a lead in, a little bit of motion. So I'm gonna turn this bank just a touch more so that this is kind of going away from us optically just a touch further. I don't know if it's gonna work or not, but let's just see. Have to brush that out. A little bit bouncy. So I'll probably want to straighten that out a little bit.
What was bouncy?
The where the ground met the water, thank you for clarifying, was kind of going, so I want the where the ground meets the water, because water lies flat, is probably a little on the flatter side. We'll just help it to feel like, the ground is meeting. I can have, of course, things, coming down and into the water a little bit. But if your line is really wavy, or the water and the ground meet, it just feels weird. Let's go ahead and bring in hints of some kind of shrubbery in there. It looks so weird with the reflection, but a little bit of implied detail there. Just the light catching on the tops of maybe some bushes. What's making this shape go up? What's making, it could be low leaves on the trees, but more likely it's bushes. All right, I'm gonna have my sun there, just like you guys said. So let's create a marker for ourselves. Maybe I'll move it a little over to the, I don't know, maybe so it's behind some trunks a little bit, not just sitting smack dab in the middle of the opening. Okay, so my light is going to get lighter to darker as it moves away from this space. The same thing is going to happen. You guys aren't seeing how many paper towels I'm burning through here, so just keep grabbing new paper towels. So this would be my lightest. Area. And then I can just push less hard as I come back in and create the sense of light going across. So you see how it gets lighter to a touch darker. I can also blast that light into here. I can take off some of that so this trunk isn't quite as dark because it's getting washed out by that light. Do the same thing down below.
How does he do it?
Well, that's
Hey, Mouse, what you doing back?
We're gonna do the same thing above. So the light's here. This means this part of the sky right here is the closest to our light. So that's probably gonna be some of the brightest light. And decide, how bright is that? Or is it, already getting dark? Is there more clouds up here? I don't know. I should have thought of that. Same thing's gonna happen in a reflection a little bit. I'm just fluctuating my pressure that I'm pushing down to wipe away the paint. You can also look above and say, okay, this doesn't look like that trunk. Okay, what do we do? Let's get those shapes back. I'm gonna go ahead and put my finger in just a touch of paint thinner. I'm gonna dab it off because I over dipped. Take a little bit of that paint thinner. What do we want to do? Should we have some clouds? What do we got going on in our sky? We're going to go a little bit of striating. Horizontal clouds. I know it's hard to see with those reflections, but because I just put paint thinner there, I can't just bring my brush down now because that'll get into all the trees. So I got to let that kind of flash off. There's not very much paint thinner, so I just got to give it a minute and it will kind of evaporate into my breathing air here. Are you guys still into this, or should I move on? Because I'm kind of
I want to see what you do with the trees and how the sun is gonna be affected by the main bulk of the trees. How the trees are going to be affected by the sun. The main bulk of the trees.
Good.
So I can put a little bit of light on the tops. Even though the sun is coming through here, it's still hitting the dome of the sky and bouncing down to the tops. The part of the trees that's getting no light is the stuff that's opposite the sun and not affected by the light. So it'd be kind of underneath in here, right? Because the trees are shaped like this. I want to kind of remember that they have a structure. They're not just flat shapes. So, but the strongest light, of course, is coming from the sun, from underneath kind of the trees to a degree. So I can add a little bit of light. Maybe it's darks, maybe not quite so dark on top. Because again, I got some of that reflected light coming down. That same information can work to a degree on my bushes if I want it to, even though they might be underneath the tree and not really getting any of that light, but I can still, know that some light is sneaking through. The brightest light again is coming from underneath. So yeah, Michelle, for me, a lot of it is just thinking about how does light travel? If it's a clear day, it's a straighter line. If it's an overcast day or slightly foggy, then the light will really envelop things. It's a lot softer. I like to think of it as almost the light giving a hug to objects when there's soft, hazy light. All right, let's see. Wish me luck. I'm going to try brushing that out a little bit. Hopefully there's not too much paint thinner. And I can already see that this is a little bright because it's almost the same as that. So what I'll do is, well, we'll see. Just going to brush that out a little bit. So hopefully that reflection goes away. And hopefully what you guys are beginning to see left over is that the tops of the trees are just slightly lighter than the shadow side. Does that work, Michelle?
Yep.
Not a scientist, but you definitely want to think about some science things. Again, how is light traveling? How does depth work? What is the atmosphere, the time of day, the weather effects? All those things play a key into it. But that's, again, depending on how realistic of a rendering do you want to make. It's fine if you just said, you know what, but this is all about my mood today. And it's just big dark silhouettes against a moody sky, then that's fine too. Again, we're poets, not journalists. Unless you want to be a journalist that day.
Beautiful.
It's almost like well, it is a very much a monochromatic painting with just slight temperature shifts right now. If I wanted to, I could literally come in and start adding color now. It would be a little trickier because, you know, especially where it's really dark, it's quite dense. There's still a lot of, you know, clay on there if we keep using that metaphor. And so a little harder to paint wet into wet, but if I wanted to start bringing in, and I can still just keep sculpting, I can look back, but if I wanted to bring some paint, I definitely can. And then one other great thing about both the transparent earth red or oxide red and the burnt umber is that they're two of the fastest drying colors in paint. So using them as underpaintings has really served me well in that they start to tack up and I can apply paint on top pretty quickly.
But if you're generally happy with it as it is, would you just stop and say, this was a fun, nice, toneless painting?
Yeah, just put my signature on there.
Awesome.
Should have put your signature on there. Yeah, I mean, why not, right? I mean, that is it. And there's times where you're just like, okay, I don't know. You know, today wasn't even going to hardly be a painting day. I don't know if I'm judging properly. I'm very surprised by the results, you know, is surprised you know, the fact that it's better than I had thought it might be. Does that equal good? I don't know. So yeah, why not just step aside? Why not start a second one? Why not, you know what I mean? Like, there's no reason I have to just keep painting and painting. I can let it sit. I can let it age. I can come and get fresh eyes on it later this afternoon or tomorrow but yeah, I mean, that's why I created that illuminated tones, because sometimes these paintings turn out really nice. Like, to move forward is probably to ruin kind of this spontaneity and this interesting, and again, I'm not saying that about this painting in particular, but some paintings do just end up so nice in this stage. I mean, I could imagine like a little cooler sky up there. You know, maybe just lean in towards the blue a little bit. I don't know. I don't want to touch it, but you know, a little cooler there to make the warms feel warmer. I just got to decide, you know, what is the story that I want this to tell? Is it enough that it's just a line of, you know, earthy colors? Or is it about the warmth of this light? Then maybe I need some cools. Or is it about the light of the light? Then maybe I even need darker darks. But I can do all that later. This painting's not going anywhere. It's only gonna set up and make it easier to paint the next stage. So some days, you guys, I will literally have so much fun with this that I'll just set this aside and do another one. Maybe, you know, just trying to figure out what's a slightly different variation on this. Maybe what if what if it was inverse? What if it was all about the reflection instead, right? You know, imagine these are trees and this is the water. So you can do lots with this. I can make it, you know, much smaller trees and a lot more sky. I can make it so there's not any sky showing and the trees are closer. So there's a lot of variation within even this very simplistic theme that I can, you know, explore. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
Michael, I was doing simultaneously this, but I don't see the Indian yellow color in when I wipe it out. I-
What
Is it
brand are you using?
You see, as you did, I initially painted with Indian yellow and then transparent earth red and all that. But
Uh-huh.
when I wipe it, I don't see the Indian yellow color. Is it because I use Gamsol?
Are you mixing the first layer with Gamsol?
Yeah,
I mean, maybe what I do, I mean, have you let the Indian yellow sit for a couple minutes before you?
yes, but there was a Gamsol because without that, I was not able to spread it.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. The other thing is if you're painting on a very slick surface, it just doesn't absorb. I was a little bit nervous that this wouldn't absorb, but I actually kind of like that I'm able to really wipe it back a long ways. So
Mhm.
I'm thinking about the surface. That's one of the reasons I use that cheap gesso, even sometimes just a little layer of it, a thin coat of it, is that it makes the surface just a little more thirsty.
Mhm.
It's fun working upside down too, because it just helps me to see some of my shapes a little more.
Yeah.
Let's try something here. Let's just
The water actually looks like water with in the,
Yeah.
so beautiful, Michael.
well, and I'll tell you what, like just by even showing you guys this, let me flip it back right side up. But I can just simply take,
Wow.
just gonna take
I can
a little bit of a clean towel here. I'm just gonna take where the reflection's coming down and I'm just gonna bring that across lightly, lightly, lightly. Just make sure I keep using a clean part of the towel.
Yeah.
beautiful.
That's great. Very nice.
That back down.
Wow.
Love it.
I'm gonna go back again. This soft brush, because I'm actually gonna use that reflection that's showing up a little bit on your guys's monitor, because I know that most of my galleries have overhead lighting. So it's going to be a reasonably similar effect. So where I actually want this kind of dissipation of line,
Have you ever done that as a really large painting, Michael?
not that I really remember, but I mean, it's kind of an interesting effect, right? That the angle of the light hitting the literally little tiny minuscule ridges of the paint on the surface makes a difference how the paint looks.
Mm-hmm. And if you're
I've
using
always-
transparent paint, it can really have a huge impact.
I would imagine so, yeah. So I did use that on a recent piece called Solitude. It was a tree sitting on a cliff. It was fairly monochromatic.
Yep.
But what I did was actually, before I painted it, I had it planned out and I knew where the ocean was behind the tree. And actually with gesso, I built up ridges in the ocean.
Mm.
So that when I came back in at the end of the painting and kind of toned it with, you know, I think I used a burnt umber Indian yellow mix to kind of tone it. It actually caught up on the rivulets of the gesso from before. Does that make sense? Kind of
Mhm.
weird.
Yeah,
But I built a texture to lay the paint on top of, and then also knowing that by having these horizontal little wavelets, that they would catch the, you know, the top parts of those bumps would capture the light that's coming down from above, and then they would almost cast little subtle tiny shadows. And it worked out really well. I was like, oh man, this is a little bit cheating.
no, it's not.
No, you're creative. You're inventive.
Yeah,
Whatever works.
yep.
Isn't that called impasto?
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, so it's just a
Also,
little bit.
Thicker paint, but I don't know what it means when you do it as the underlayer that you're gonna paint over the top, but maybe that's the right.
Forethought.
It's your sculpting.
Forethought.
Yeah, forethought. That's my problem. I don't usually have that in my paintings. I like to just see
There
what's.
you go. You're
Yeah.
getting it. I'm teasing you, Michael. It looks like the wind is whispering to the water.
The other thing is that I know these burnt umber colors in here, they will dry a little more matte because I've added no medium to this. So right now they're wet, so they are extra shiny. I do know that most all of these colors that I have on here, and that just comes from experience, that they will dry a little less shiny. So anyways, I can just keep painting and painting forever. I can pick up other brushes, like this is just a clean brush, and I can just kind of dab in and create a little more hint of texture. There's all sorts of different tricks I can use or techniques. I could also use this squeegee type thing, this rubber tool, and I can really get in there and start cleaning out, you know, fine lines in between. I could also use my Q-tips, which is what I would probably normally kind of do. And I can get in there and get some interesting sky holes into it. Again, I just want to make sure they're not too bright. I can also use that to make some of these trunks that my fat fingers can't get in between, you know, get in there and carve them out a little better. So there's all sorts of different tools and tricks and toys that you will discover if this is something that you find useful and begin to experiment with it. And that's just it. It's just literally like when I'm at the dollar store, I find myself sometimes going, ooh, I could grab that spatula. Oh, and that squeegee. Oh, and what would that sponge do to my paints? You know, who cares? I'm only out $3 with all those tools. Just remember to don't take it down to the kitchen after I'm done. But constantly, I even experimented with like just crumpling up tin foil because I was liking, you know, these paper towels are too high quality, but if you grab the crappy paper towels, you can really start making interesting, you know, irregular marks with those as you pick up, and then the paint that you pick up, you can kind of put it back down in different areas and make different shapes. I mean, so it's just, again, it's just fun. I had low expectations for this painting. I just wanted to get my head, and already I'm feeling better. Like I'm feeling like, okay, I can paint a little bit, something today.
We used to use cellophane candy wrappers on the china to get texture in the background of some things. You just
Perfect.
kind
Yeah.
of press it in.
Perfect.
And the other thing I found was, I want to say steel wool, but that's not what it is. It's those thicker scrubber, metal scrubber things for the kitchen. And those make fantastic grass.
Grass. Yeah, I mean, a lot of painters use like the real sponges, you know, the sea sponges. I think you buy them at art stores. I just find, I mean, I might even have some that I never use. Nope, I don't. But yeah, I mean, it's just, have fun. Again, my buddy Don, when I go out painting with him, I'll just find him plucking grass and different, dry grasses and things, and he'll just start making marks with them, and even takes a rubber brand and we'll put a bunch of them on a stick, and all of a sudden he's got a really interesting, odd brush, and just helps to make these interesting organic shapes that you just wouldn't make. And if they don't work, just brushes them out. If they do work, then that's something totally original to that painting. So
I
because this
accidentally bought the wrong size coffee filter one time, and rather than throw it away, I just kept it, and I crinkle it up in different shapes and use it to do texture.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, exactly. So they're all getting very regular. I'm just making these little dots so I can just kind of brush them out, brush some of them a little more. I could take a small paintbrush and just kind of give them some more interesting shape. That's the problem with Q-tips, again, is that they just want to make the same dang little mark over and over and over, and it becomes really redundant really fast. So I just have to remember to either alter them or not use them only in a small amount of the painting. Yeah, are we good, guys? Are we ready to
We're good, because I'm trying to figure out why you're doing any more.
All
Looks good.
Put that signature back on there.
right.
And Michael, I know we've talked about before, with acrylics, can you do this kind of technique?
We found that with open acrylics, you have a chance, but not with normal acrylics. So with normal acrylics, I would do something similar, but it's not removing, it's just adding very quickly, because it's drying so fast. So yeah, no, this doesn't work.
Yeah.
Not for that whole thing. But if you were going to do some smaller areas and work through them, I don't know how to quite explain it, but I know when I do it.
Yeah, with my Mr. bottle and stuff, I can definitely work smaller areas.
Yeah.
Ugh, this line. Does that bother you guys?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's figure out. We're gonna bring, just picking up a little paint off some areas that have a lot. I'm just gonna take that and mess this up, just so it's not so regular.
That's better.
Some of those tree trunks got a little regular too.
Yeah.
You were right. I should have been done a bit ago.
Well, what's wrong with me? I like them.
You do like your regular tree trunks.
I do.
You like organization, that's all.
I do. And that's because my house is not organized.
Mine sure isn't.
Okay. Whew.
As Barbara Ramsey Snow would say, put the brush down.
Barbara Ramsey Snow.
Yeah, she's gone now, but she was a wonderful porcelain artist.
I
Yeah,
love porcelain painting.
I used to have well, you guys, some of you know him, Thomas Kitts. Used
Yeah.
to say, how many painters does it take to finish a painting? 2. One to come over and knock the paintbrush out of the other one's hand.
Very good.
All right, done, signed. What am I doing? So fun, right? I did work on that a bit longer than I had anticipated. Do you guys think we should do kind of critique and feedback to make sure we have time for that, and then we can use leftover time to get this next painting started, or would you guys prefer to see more painting and risk? How many of you guys need feedback at this point in your paintings for moving forward with your final painting?
I can get mine tomorrow.
Yeah, but I prefer not to give too much critiques and feedback on Thursday. That's kind of my.
Okay.
I'd
I
like
would-
to see the other demo.
Yeah, I'd like to see you paint.
More
I like-
painting.
You paint.
Does anybody urgently have any questions about their work?
Michael, I have. If my Indian yellow is not seeing, do you think I should put it again on the top?
Yeah, you sure can.
So-
Yeah, glazing doesn't need to be done on the top or the bottom. It can be done throughout the painting.
So, yeah, thank you.
Yep. How are you doing, Tom? You have need anything? You're always so quiet in class.
I have finished and I put on Padlet the acrylic copy of the photograph I'm trying to copy. I'm going to start now with the probably tomorrow with the oils. And my question is, before I do that, I need to thin out my trees a little bit with acrylic, but it dries so fast, and water and a Q-tip is not helping me put my sky holes in.
If
So,
you try very carefully, you may be able to use a little bit of alcohol.
oh, okay.
Just try it, test it in a spot that you don't care about first. But it
Vodka,
is-
not just for drinking anymore.
that's right. Now, we always had a small bottle of alcohol and a small bottle of mineral oil and a couple other things that we worked with. And in this particular case, I think you might be able to use a Q-tip and a little alcohol.
But
Okay.
why couldn't you just come over the top of it with the color that you need to make it thinner?
You
like-
could. There's no reason why you couldn't.
But then I wouldn't get my sky holes. And I
No, you
really
No,
need,
you would put them in.
You
You
paint them.
paint them in.
all right, gotcha.
Yeah,
So yeah, like that wave painting that we diagnosed right now, I just went back and covered big areas with medium gray. But that's what I like about painting with black and white acrylics is I can just, I'm not wiping away. I'm just, I mix the black and the white and make all the values of gray that I need. And then I just figure out what value I need. But if I was using color, I would just, whatever the sky color was, I would just bring that down and use that to put my little sky holes with color.
Oh, that's a good idea. Got it.
Yeah, wiping away is only just a tiny piece of most paintings. The beginning stage or whatever else, but mostly you're painting, opaque paint into there
Okay.
or, thicker paint. Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and I have been drinking a lot of water here. I'm going to go ahead and do a stop recording. We're going to take another little 5-minute break. We'll be back at 11:45.